historically, media has presented queer stories as very trauma focused, which of
Mm-hmm.
course, there is often trauma
Yeah.
around being queer and coming out and all of that. But I think that a good change would be offering a hopeful alternative to that,
Yeah.
where it's saying, yes, that could happen, that may happen, but
Mm-hmm.
also, things can be great. And once you tackle those, you also have access to being a part of this wonderful, loving community. And it doesn't all have to be terrifying. And I think that would be very helpful, particularly for queer youth who
Yeah.
are figuring themselves out. So I think that would be that.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tales of Our Times. This is a show where we discuss the stories that move us, what makes them so meaningful, and why others could or should find meaning in them as well. This is not a spoiler-free show, so bear that in mind as you continue to listen. We tackle books, movies, podcasts, and more. Where there's a story, there's a reason to read or watch in today's case. I'm your host, Amanda Stevens, and you're joining us at the tail end of our Pride Month special, where we're inviting members of our colorful LGBTQ plus community to talk about stories in which they feel seen. And joining me to help wrap up with a much discussed piece of media is my friend Yvonne López. Welcome, Yvonne.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on the show. So before we get started, is there anything that you would like to say to introduce yourself to the listeners?
Sure. I think going along with what you said, being Pride Month and all, I identify as bisexual, and I think that's also why the piece of media that I picked for today resonates so much with me, because the main character, Nick, discovers that he's bisexual and comes out as bisexual. So despite the fact that I'm not a teenager,
Mm-hmm.
the identity was more of a recent discovery
Yeah.
for me. So I think I actually saw a lot of myself in Nick. It's like maybe my inner child needed that.
Oh, that's so heartwarming. But that is
It's a
actually,
heartstopper.
and oh my God, and it all comes full circle, which is also why I'm
Yeah.
excited to talk about this, because
Uh-huh.
one question that we've been investigating is also
Uh-huh.
what gives people hope. If there's anything in media
Yeah.
that gives people hope that like things are still changing for the better. And this
Right.
has come up at least twice, I think, so far. So today we are talking about Heartstopper. We did say that.
Yeah.
What episode are we talking about today?
So it was kind of hard to pick just
Yeah.
one, but I think, season one focuses on that journey, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
Nick discovering he's bisexual. The season finale, episode 8, is kind of the culmination of that, where he has all of the language, he knows what he wants to say, and he decides he's going to come out to his mom.
Mm-hmm.
So the
Yeah.
scene, it's the very last scene. So like you said, spoilers, but
Oh, yeah. So everyone watch out.
it's a it's heart wrenching. It's like I don't know anyone who wasn't bawling their eyes out
Yeah.
watching that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was it's a beautiful scene where, like I said, he's going in prepared for it to possibly go very wrong,
Yeah.
but then it doesn't. His mom
Mm-hmm.
responds in a very
Positive
gentle,
way.
warm, and affirming way. Yes.
Ah.
And it's nice to see that, where you can feel his nerves building up when you're watching it. You're like, oh my gosh, because we've been there as queer people.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
moment where you're like, I'm about to tell someone, and I don't know what's going to happen
Well,
after this.
and I think because, like you mentioned, like so many of the stories that we see in media today are like trauma stories or rooted in like a bad reaction.
Yeah, and rejection.
Right, right. Well, and this story doesn't do that. And so that's why we're talking
Yeah,
about
it
it at the
doesn't do
end.
that. Yeah.
We're gonna give it a little bit of hope. But do you think right before we get into the summary, is there anything else that you think we should know about this, or should we just get started?
Oh, let's just get into it. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to give a quick overview of the series as a whole, and then I'm going to pop to Yvonne for the episode summary. So while the series follows many people in different relationships and stages of their lives, I'm going to focus on Nick and Charlie to keep this short and sweet. Charlie is an openly gay student at his high-end all-boys school who has been in and out of relationships with mostly closeted guys. Nick is a popular rugby jock from the same school and in Charlie's homeroom, and is straight. This is important because as soon as they meet in homeroom, Charlie crushes hard on Nick, despite his friends' warning that it won't work out. However, to everyone, including Nick's surprise, it actually blooms into a flirtation as Nick realizes that he is attracted to Charlie as well. He's still figuring himself out. Despite this, he wants to stay involved with Charlie, and they agree to keep their budding relationship a secret, at least until Nick can get his head straight. But eventually, Nick realizes that his feelings for Charlie are real and that he himself is actually bisexual. And while things seem to be going well, the fact that Nick and Charlie's relationship is a secret is causing some major friction, not just between them, but also with some of their friends. And that is up until episode 8. So, Yvonne, can you tell us what happens in the season 1 finale for Heartstopper?
Okay, so the episode right before the finale, Nick and Charlie have, as a couple, experienced unwanted confrontation and like homophobia.
So scary.
So this is very new to Nick, who has been kind of flying under the radar all this time, whereas Charlie, he was known as the gay kid. Yeah, so he was very used to the bullying. And so Nick was kind of seeing like, wait, sometimes being gay sucks and people suck.
Right.
So, the end of that episode 7, he's faced with the reality of this. Charlie kind of retreats a little bit.
Yeah.
And starts distancing himself from Nick. So I think Nick kind of has to make a choice. Am I going to stand with this boy that I love in this? Yeah. Or am I going to just decide, or just kidding, I want to be straight and like, I want to be perceived as straight. So episode 8, the finale is called Boyfriend. And Nick takes Charlie on this beautiful excursion that he's planned to the beach, where he asks Charlie officially to be his boyfriend in also a very beautiful scene. Yes, God. I know, I'm like trying not to cry thinking about it.
Okay.
So he's like, okay, I've done it. Not only am I here gonna stick around, but like I want you to be my boyfriend and I want everyone to know.
Yeah, it's gonna be official.
So he does this, and then the very next step is, okay, so now Charlie is my boyfriend and I'm going to tell my mom. Like, he just nosedives into it, which I really admire.
Wow.
It's a lot of courage, especially for a teenager, right? He's like, I'm in it, right?
What determination. So, I'm so impressed.
Right. And I think it's just he sees Charlie struggling so much and feeling so unwanted with like closeted straight boys who have then rejected him or hidden him.
Right.
But Nick decided, I'm not going to be that because I'm not that. I am sure that I want to be with you, and whatever that means for me, I'm willing to take those consequences. Okay.
So he decides, I'm going to go tell my mom, and we're going to be out in the open, and there's going to be no hiding, and we're just going to, like, as cheesy as it sounds, we're going to, like, live our truth, and that's just going to be it.
Exactly. So the coming out scene, he's coming down from that high of, this, exciting thing just happens, beautiful day, and now panic, anxiety, like, I have to do this, and am I going to be able to do it?
Yeah.
So they're, like, sitting at the kitchen table, Nick and his mom at home, and you can see him, like I said, struggling to get the words out. But he does it in the most, calm, collected, eloquent way possible. Again, very impressive for
what
a
dream.
teenager.
Yeah.
Yeah. He comes out as bisexual. He expresses his love for Charlie and his desire to be open about their relationship.
Yeah.
So I remember, as someone who's been in this situation many times, usually as you're talking, you're kind of watching that person's face for any like micro facial expressions, any kind of unease to see like, where is it going down? Like, is this going well? Exactly. So you can see her, like, her eyes were kind of filling up with tears, but she's smiling. You can see in her face that she's happy that he's saying this to her. And she actually says at some point, I'm sorry if I at any point made you feel like you couldn't tell me that.
Yeah.
So even just the fact that that was in her head, like, I'm glad that we're here now. He's comfortable enough now. And, there's a lot of parents who tend to deny not being good parents or not, creating a safe space for their children. But she even preemptively said, like, I'm sorry if I ever made you feel like you couldn't tell me that. So this season kind of has that hopeful tone at the end of it. It's a wonderful opportunity to celebrate queer joy,
Mm-hmm.
young love, and self acceptance. And I think that it gave the character Nick the opportunity to again affirm, like, no, I'm sure I'm bisexual.
Yeah.
And using that word, even, I think, is pretty rare in media
Mm-hmm.
where either everyone's just kind of confused about that character, like, oh, they have a boyfriend. Oh, now they have a girlfriend. Oh, I
Right.
guess who knows what's going on there.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
it's nice.
I think something we haven't had too much opportunity to talk about up until now, what I hear called bisexual erasure, which is that you see
Yes.
lesbian stories and you see gay
Mm-hmm.
male stories, but you do not
Mm-hmm.
often see characters who are just allowed to be bisexual and live in that identity, whatever their relationship looks like
Mm-hmm.
at the moment, whether it looks like a queer
Mm-hmm.
relationship or it looks like a heterosexual relationship. They don't
Very
often
much
get that
so.
same like identity allowed to them.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and I think that that's why I think that this show in particular has almost set like a new standard
Hmm.
for bi representation in particular. And
Right.
I also love that it's with a male character because
Yeah.
I think with male characters typically it's like, oh, if you're even mildly interested in men, you're just gay.
Yeah. You become gay.
And yes, and it's like with women typically it's, oh, you're just like bi-curious, but you're
Hmm.
straight,
Or
right?
sometimes
So
like
I feel like,
fetishized.
right, right,
Hmm.
right. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of like, if you say you're bisexual, people will still try to put you somewhere else.
Yeah. So do you think that this character, Nick, and the way that he grows and like discovers himself and is able to fully embrace his identity, is that what made you
Mhm.
feel seen about this episode, or was there more to that?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that phrase that he uses a lot, I'm bisexual, actually really
Hmm.
resonated with me. Where I personally, I had almost the opposite experience that Nick had, where he, I think, was perceived as straight
Hmm.
before realizing that he's bisexual.
Yeah, yeah.
For me, I identified as a lesbian for a
Hmm.
vast majority of my adulthood.
Yeah.
And for me, that label meant a lot more to me than I realized
Yeah.
because that meant for me that I got to exist outside of the expectations of
Hmm.
having, like, being attracted to men. I was just like, I'm gay from like, I
Right.
can't even remember how young I was, but I
Hmm.
just always knew.
That was the
And
first
it was,
realization for you, was like, I'm definitely
hmm
into women for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that never was a question for me. But
Hmm.
it wasn't until later that I started to wonder, like, am I also attracted to men?
Right.
And that was a little bit more confusing. But for me, I was
Yeah.
like, well, I don't have to figure that out now
Of course
because
not.
I was pretty much always in relationships with women, so it was
Hmm.
just irrelevant information to me. And I think right around the time that Heartstopper came out is when I started to really kind of sit with it and ask myself, like,
Oh.
am I?
Yeah.
And I remember even a little bit before that, just because we had the language that we didn't have when I was growing up in like the
Right.
early 2000s.
Right.
I remember hearing about, pansexuality and
Hmm.
things like that. And I remember thinking, I think I'm pan romantic, where maybe I can
Yeah.
develop some kind of emotional or romantic attraction for anyone,
Hmm.
but I'm definitely homosexual, so like
Yeah.
definitely still a lesbian. And I just sat with that for a bit. But yeah, like I said, right around the same time I was watching Heartstopper, where I was
Uh-huh.
questioning more of myself. So I feel like I remember I had a moment of clarity in my head,
Yeah.
and I actually heard Nick's voice in my head say, I'm
I'm
bisexual,
bisexual,
actually.
actually. Yes.
Yes.
Oh my
So it
God.
really just resonated
Yeah.
with me. And I remember thinking too, like, like I said, I'm not a teenager. I'm not in high school. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
navigating this for the first time, but
Mm-hmm.
his storyline aligned with mine in a way where that representation and the way that he affirmed himself
Yeah.
helped me like well into my 30s.
Yeah. And that's so interesting too, because I don't think we also hear a lot of these stories as well, coming at it from, as you did, the other way, not
Hmm.
from the straight assumed way, but from even just a different
Right.
identity. And it is hard
Yeah.
when you realize at a young age who you believe yourself to be, or sometimes who you want yourself to be. And then you grow up
Hmm.
and recognizing that that might not be what it actually is a really hard shift to make. It can be really hard to kind of
Yeah.
shift into a new reality. Even if that feels more honest, it's also like the newness of it can be
Yes,
very upsetting.
for sure. And I love that you brought that up because it reminds me of another point. Like when I was talking about Nick experiencing homophobia for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
basically,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, and you talking about bi erasure as well,
Mm-hmm.
I realized that having that label of lesbian in the queer community
Yeah.
was also privilege, right? Because
Yeah.
no one was really questioning, like, do you really belong here?
It was a much
So
easier
I think,
access.
yeah, and I think because everyone who had known me before always knew me as a lesbian. But I think more so what I experience now is when I meet people for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
introduce myself, and I'm like, hello, my name is bisexual.
Yeah.
No, but like,
Actually.
meeting someone actually,
Actually.
uh, yeah, and
Mm.
then just them knowing that immediately and
Yeah.
then being kind of like, oh, like that somehow makes me less gay. And I'm like, no, 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 I put in like a good 20
You're like,
years of service as
yeah.
a lesbian here. So, like, I belong
I'm a
here.
card carrying member of this community, so I don't want to hear any questions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think for similar to Nick, where he had this,
Mm-hmm.
privilege of being perceived as straight,
Yeah.
I had the privilege in the queer community of being perceived as a lesbian, and then
Mm-hmm.
suddenly, having that questioned. I've known about bi erasure, and I've known about the struggle of bisexual people or pansexual people
Mm-hmm.
struggling to fit in because they're not perceived as gay enough or queer
Yeah.
enough. And I always thought, man, that sucks, but I had never experienced that myself.
Mm-hmm.
And now I feel like kind of like Nick had to decide, I'm just going to stand
Right.
firm in my bisexual identity.
Mm-hmm.
Where I feel like I'm still a little bit mourning the loss of the label of lesbian.
Yeah.
So, like, I think it's a similar experience where you had this privilege and
Mm-hmm.
then you realize that you don't or you can't anymore. You have to decide, I'm just going to do the easy thing
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
not try to figure this out for myself. But you realize, you want to give yourself that clarity and that
Yeah.
full understanding. And then also just that it's okay to change your mind or to realize
Right.
I am or I'm not or whatever. Like
Right.
it's fluid and it's really not the end of the world.
Yeah.
And sometimes, those labels and the language gives us the tools that we need to express ourselves, but
Mm-hmm.
they also don't have to be limiting.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask. Then the second to last question is, what do you think
Mm-hmm.
makes this a tale of our time? But I guess what I'm wondering is, do you think that it is precisely because Heartstopper gives the language to people who watch it to
Yeah.
discuss these kind of issues and kind of gives you scripts or gives you the questions to ask and like examples of what that may look like in ways that are not
Mm-hmm.
negative?
Yeah, I think a lot of times as, a millennial, we're getting a little bit older and we
Yeah.
start to get that whole like, kids these days. Every generation gets to that where we
Mm-hmm.
just think we're a little bit better or a little bit tougher than
The
younger
youth.
guys. But yes, the youth. But I think this was an experience where I watched it and I was like, you know what? Not only do I think like, the kids, they're going to be all right, but like
Mm-hmm.
they really figured something out here
Yeah.
because I think, like you said, the language, like they have the language and they're modeling, ways that you can bring up these questions. I think that this show in particular is awesome in showcasing the emotional intelligence of queer youth today
Yeah.
that maybe we didn't have when I was that age. And like I said, I feel like my inner child is healing from watching these narratives play out because I needed that at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just being able to watch it happen in a positive way and watch kids do better than we did, like that is really just such an affirming moment.
Yeah,
Well, unfortunately,
absolutely.
we are out of time. But before we go, I'd like to ask you one last question.
Sure.
If you could give Heartstopper, but specifically season 1, episode 8, Boyfriend, a subtitle of your very own, what would that be?
I used it earlier, but I think I would say a new standard for bi
Yeah.
representation.
Yay. Yeah, definitely. Especially, we spent so much time talking about it. I think that has to be it.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So, well, Yvonne, that's all the time that we have for today. But thank you so much for coming on the show. I have really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, no, likewise, I had an awesome time. Thanks again for having me.
And to all of you listeners out there, this has been Tales of Our Time on Radio Taiwan International. I was your host, Amanda Stevens, with my guest, Yvonne López. We'll be back with a regular episode next week. But in the meantime, remember that today we were discussing Heartstopper, Season 1, Episode 8, Boyfriend, a new standard for bi representation, and a tale of our time. We'll see you next time.